Our world continues to change and push us in ways we have not been challenged before. On this show, we talk about these challenges, how to be aware of them, face them, and overcome them in your life. This is David Waldas, creator of the Aligned Living System.
And I'm Nick Musica, Aligned Living Coach. Welcome to the Aligned Living System podcast.
Welcome to the Aligned Living System podcast. This is David Waldas here with Nick Musica. And
Good morning.
Sorry, I talked over you. Good morning, Nick.
All good. Just saying good morning. Just saying good morning.
Nice. Yeah, so our topic today is about navigating this current world that we're in. And there's a quote from Lee Harris. If you don't know who he is, he's a channel guy from England, lives in the States, does a monthly forecast. Like really, I've followed him for many years and seen him live a few times. Really tapped in, just authentic, dead on with what he says. And he had this quote that really just landed for me. And he said, right now on the planet, and I think he said this several years ago, or at least a while ago, right now on the planet that, we've never seen, in most of our lifetimes, so much kind of heaviness, so much crap going on, so much density, like all the things that can suck us into the what's wrong. And at the same time, as all those densities are so available to us, we've never had more access to the higher energies, to the higher realms, to this, high vibration that we can attune to as well. Of course, that's what aligned living is, right? Like we're choosing to attune to this highest aspects of ourselves rather than all the lower stuff and all the shit that pulls us sideways and gets us all gunked up. And so it's such a remarkable time, right? Like this duality of consciousness, and maybe duality is kind of a confusing word to use because you think of that in the third dimensional kind of what's going on here, the earth place of being sucked into all these things. But when we're aware of that choice and we go, man, there's all this shit going on, there's all these things that kind of scary, right? All these things that the more we zoom into them, the more uncomfortable we feel, the more sideways we feel, the more unsure we feel. But at the same time, when we have this other option to tap into this higher frequencies and go, yeah, all that other stuff's going on, but having these higher frequencies, having this access to ourself at another level that we haven't had access to before, that's becoming so much more stabilized, it's remarkable. And when we do that, our experience of being, even in the unfolding of all the, craziness that's happening on the planet, and, it's just the time period that we're in, what that looks like, we have an opportunity to navigate this time in history in a way where there's so much choice point of going, well, we're moving through a phase of really kind of destruction. It's letting go of old ways of being, letting go of old energies. And there's a lot of catalysts for that break things free. And so when we're aware of stabilizing the energy that's on the other side of that, it helps us move through that process. It helps humanity move through that process. And it helps us stabilize at a place where there can be, really from a human level, maybe some rather horrific looking things going on, but at the same time, us being in this place where we're not experiencing that at a visceral level. We can see the bigger picture. We can see where all of this is headed, and we can stabilize in that place and allow for that process to unfold without us pulling us into that vortex of catastrophizing and, struggling with digesting what's happening. And it's so imperative that those of us that have that capacity utilize it. Because if we have that capacity, it means that we actually have a big energy. We have a big influence. We can really amplify all the different things that are available. And if we get sucked into the, oh my God, the sky is falling, we can amplify that. We can make that so much bigger than it has to be. But we also can tap into, wow, this is clearing something for this, new experiences of the high vibrational, just being able to live in that place. And when we tap our energy into that, we can amplify that and call that into being like never before. And so we're at kind of a choice point of what are we going to experience as individuals? Do we zoom in to the stuff that's happening that really doesn't feel good? or do we lock in on our alignment and understand the process that's happening from a higher perspective, from a shifting of consciousness, a shifting of humanity, a whole new era that we're moving into that's very active right now. Yeah, so welcome again, Nick.
Thanks,
And is
David.
this a
Yeah.
heavy topic or is it a super light one? It's kind of funny because it's, again, what are we tapping into?
Fair enough. So can you, like, you gave us a really big picture,
Yeah.
right? And like in a big framework.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you land at like an example of that for folks?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting, right? So today's April 5th.
Yeah.
It's 10:30-ish Mountain Time. Right? And this morning, there was this earthquake in
Yeah.
New Jersey, it's
Yep.
shaking
Yep.
Manhattan. And, how do we experience that? Do we go, oh shit, like we've been feeling weird stuff happening, like this is the beginning of it, or this like, and do we get kind of sucked into like that fear base of it, or do we go, wow, there's a lot of energy moving through the planet right now? This is in the big picture. There's like, whew, okay, whenever I've been around earthquakes, there's something so activating about them. And I'm like when I lived in San Diego for quite a while, so we had a bunch of them. And every time afterwards, there was this really interesting buildup of like this kind of confusing, disorienting feeling. And then they would happen, and it would be some sort of a release of energy too. Like what a massive release of energy, right? When an earthquake happens, it's just this shifting and feeling afterwards what it would feel like to just, it was very freedom creating. It kind of opened up, what was stuck, what was kind of grinding against itself, not
Mm-hmm.
just in the earth, but in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so do we look at that and go, oh my God, this is what people have been talking about, right? Like this is the beginning of the things, or the middle of the things, or whatever. Or do we go like, oh, like there's all this release that's available here. And if we zoom in at the human level, and maybe how scary it was for people that are in a skyscraper feeling it sway back and forth in a place where we don't really have earthquakes, and the anomaly of that, or do we go, oof, like I can feel the bigger picture of this. I can feel the movement that's happening, and that unlocks something for me. And at the same time, having to deal with, for some people, it's scary. Can I let it be scary for them? For some people that are in the center of it, it's super scary. It disrupts their whole life, depending on what we're talking about. But for us as each as individuals, if we're focusing on our own internal expansion rather than the contraction that are happening in the places where, for whatever reason, it may need to, we're having a very different experience. And, I think that is the era that we're in now, where we're watching, wars around the world. We're watching, and none of this is necessarily new, but there's a different level of intensity to it. There's a different level of the way that we were experiencing it, because it feels like it means something different. Does that make sense? Or how does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I just want to jump on that last part you mentioned. So you said there's, was it heaviness or meaning? Were those the words you use?
Uh, Good question. That's a
Yeah.
problem
Okay.
with channeling, is that's why I like to edit the podcast myself, because I go back and go, what did I say?
More, I think you used the phrase intensity to it.
Okay.
And I think part of that is because it feels like it's right there, right? Like
Yeah,
we have
it is.
access to all of it.
Yeah, that's a great
Um,
point.
like we never had before, the first time showing war on TV, I think, was Vietnam. And that, and putting a face to that, changed people's perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And now you don't have to wait for the 6 o'clock news, right?
No,
It's
no.
it's pushed to you on your little phone,
And
and
live
then,
stream from individuals, not
oh my
polished.
goodness,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right, and who you're following on Twitter. I'm not going to call it X, or wherever you're following people, or what you deliberately subscribe to, which is part of what you're talking about. Like
Yeah,
we're
100%.
what magazine? Let's put in magazine land. Like what magazines are you subscribing to? How to have a
That
really
makes you
cool
sound kind of
life.
old though when you say that.
But I like magazines. I like, right, like whatever. It's gonna get delivered next week because that's how it still works. Not in your email, definitely. But really, what are you subscribing to?
Hmm.
And that to me, that's what it was sounding like when you were talking. Like, where are you subscribing? What are you putting your energy on? What are you putting your attention into? And then how do you contextualize everything else from that starting point?
Yeah, beautiful. That's a great overview of it. And two things with that, right? One is what is my experience in it? Because where I put my
Yeah,
energy is my experience in it. And then
yeah,
the other part is what am I contributing to? And when we see our energy as something that activates and changes the world around us, we don't have the freedom to go into sideways. We don't have the freedom to go in like, oh, the sky is falling. Well, it sure is now, you know?
yeah,
And
yeah.
like, I've probably told this stories on here before, but when my energy first really activated and it amplified so much that my thoughts were generating experiences in my world so fast and so clearly for about a month and a half, like I didn't have control over it. It was like I was having a lot of like a scary thing would happen and it would create another negative thought that would create another negative thing that would create another negative thought that would create another negative thing. And I think, I mean, in that month and a half period, I called 911 at least 3 times, if not more, from people just going sideways around me. Like one experience, I was driving over to a friend's place and I had changed lanes and I could feel a car coming up behind me and I like if the guy just felt kind of out of control and I had like a negative thought about him and kind of laughed about it. And when I did it, there was like a lot of judgment. There was a lot of kind of, I don't know, anger in me, a lot of
Mm.
like, who's this jerk? And he felt it because he like flipped out, like pulled his
You
car up
reacted
around
to it.
me. Yeah,
Yeah,
like he could feel because my energy was just so like blasting that it ended up in his field. And it was just so non-rational, but he like ran his car up around me, jumped out of his car, screamed at me, kicking the side of my door, trying to get me to open my door and come out. And it turned into this whole thing where I had to call the cops and like I mean, whole big blow up. And it was all generated from energy. It was all generated from me
mm,
deciding that there was a problem with this guy and my energy field just blowing it up and hitting somebody who was very volatile. And it was such a crazy example for me of like, I don't have the luxury of going into some sort of catastrophizing or judgment or like, things that used to just be thoughts, right? It used to
yeah,
be like,
right.
look at this asshole. And now
Yeah,
it's like generating something. And when we realize that about ourselves, it forces us to take our thoughts seriously in a whole new way because they're not just about how we feel, they become about what we create.
yeah,
And when we take both those, and so if we start to get worried and fearful about world events or, whatever that is, we're generating. We're not
yeah,
just having a upset internal experience. We're having a creation experience.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember I mentioned on the show more than once. Um, back when I was like 17, 18,
Hmm.
my dad introduced me to Edgar Casey
Hmm. Yeah,
with
yeah,
some of the
yeah.
books. And I remember reading uh, the phrase "thoughts are real things,"
Hmm.
and I was like, "Oh, that's like that's something to circle."
Yeah, yeah,
And it's way more meaningful now than it
yeah,
was then
yeah.
because of the reasons you're talking about.
Absolutely. And back then, like when I was probably the phase that you were talking about, you were reading it, like I interpret it as, well, it's how I feel. It's my internal world, right? Like my thoughts are real things because they adjust my internal world. And it took me a while to realize that's just the beginning.
Yes,
you
right,
know?
right, right. Yeah, and so I'm paraphrasing this next part or trying to piece together as best I can, based on what he was talking about, which was, thoughts are real things,
Hmm.
which influences your attitude,
Hmm.
which influences your actions,
Hmm.
which influences the output of the outside world, right? So
Yeah,
looking
yeah.
at the result of the 3D thing out there,
Hmm. Hmm.
that is a result of the intention, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's just a direct line from the intention,
yeah, yeah.
and that is your intention in this conversation is your thought.
Absolutely. And this time in history right now, like the energy that we carry when we really get activated,
Yeah,
amplifies that massively. And because we're so much more multidimensional now, because that's part of the shifting that humanity is happening, that influence, that's
yeah,
happening at an energetic level is so intense. And those of us that have been doing the work to continue to cultivate this internal energy and to cultivate this expansiveness inside of ourselves, that means our reach is just so much bigger, which means our responsibility is also so much bigger. And
Yeah.
that's not something to be afraid of. It's actually something to harness and go, well, this is exciting, right? Like I have an ability now to play a role in steering humanity through this,
Yeah.
but I also have the ability to steer humanity deep into it
Yeah.
and influence people in that way. And so what am I doing with it? Where's my responsibility? Can I look at what sometimes looks horrific on the outside and go, yeah, that's happening. What am I steering now? Am I going to amplify that, or am I steering this into an internal space where we can see where it's moving? What is the big
Totally.
picture? What is the light that's available here? And just
Totally.
fill, fill our surroundings with that
Yeah.
and our
Yeah. I mean, you're
influence with
talking
that.
about parameters to a large degree. And so a lot of us, I think, work in a in this capacity of these are the requirements I have to work with.
Yeah.
This is the budget, this is the timeline, this is the
Mhm.
size of the canvas, this is the geography, this is the whatever the 10 people, whatever those parameters are.
Yeah.
It's we need to create with those things. We
Yes.
need
Yeah.
the output of those things. And
Yeah.
so if the requirements were any amount of budget, you name it, or
Mhm.
how many people you tell us,
Mhm.
or what's the car you want, you name it. Like it's that's you need to dial that in.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing you say is the parameters in this context is starting with where do you want to choose,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the responsibility that comes with this choice.
Absolutely.
It's
And
liberating.
the ability to make the choice and the ability to
Totally.
have that influence is what creates
Yeah.
that responsibility. And this splitting, you know, and here's what I've been shown for a while is that because of this splitting where the dense is getting denser, there's more to get sucked into, but there's
Yeah.
also way more light available. Like that gap is further and further. And this time period, as we're having these experiences that we're having, it's going to suck the people into the density that are attracted to that, and it's going to expand those of us that are attracted to that light, that next level of ourselves, into that. And that gap then in frequency, that
Yeah.
range, is a huge difference. And when we have that they're not so close together as they have been, it makes it a lot easier to stay in our lane, because you know it's much less than it was, but for a very long time there wasn't a huge difference. Like we all had the experience of bouncing back and forth, and it was just as easy to have a bad thought as it was to have a good thought. And as that separates, and I hear this a lot from clients, they go, gosh, once I'm in my alignment and I get sucked into something negative, like it feels like I fell off a cliff, because I went from feeling
Totally.
amazing to just
Totally.
feeling like absolute shit.
Oh my
And
goodness.
right. And
Yeah.
so like this time period, we're going to experience that at whole other levels, which is really a teacher for us. It's a feedback device that says you can't go there. You can't get sucked into zooming into like, what does this feel like at a human level? You got to stay in the bigger picture, and you got
Yeah.
to stay in your connection with your access to your frequency and your light.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
don't, like, it's excruciatingly painful at a level
Totally.
that we haven't really experienced before, because we now have this range of incredible high frequencies and incredible low frequencies, and there's this no man's land in between, so we either end up in one or the other. And when we have that swing, it's just like fuck, like we lose access to everything. And
Yeah.
then when we bring ourselves back in there, we're like, just like, I am never going back into that space. And then of course something happens, we take the bait and we get sucked back in and we go, oh my God, what am I doing? And we pop back out faster, because it's just kind of unbearable. Like it's just,
Yeah. Yeah.
it does, what felt like just life feels like there's no way I can live from here.
Totally. Yeah. So the frequency and severity of those snapping back
Yeah.
into the places of misalignment
Yeah.
get fewer and less severe is, I think, what you're saying. The more you choose this path.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say it gets fewer and more severe, actually,
Oh,
because when
fewer.
you go
Oh,
from that
sure.
high
Okay.
frequency into that low frequency, it's
Yeah.
like,
Right.
like that's
Yeah.
severe. And so you do
Yeah.
it less, right? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
the kind of
Well,
things like, if like I grew up on a dead end dirt road, I didn't look too closely before I walked across the road to get the mail, because there's nobody on the road. But, when I live in a city and the road's just
Yeah, yeah,
like, I go to a crosswalk and I take it seriously.
yeah,
And so there's something there around
totally. Yeah,
consequences and us understanding them, and the experience that we're having in the moment with it, where there's direct feedback of like, I felt amazing, and now I feel like I don't even know why I'm here. Like, what am I
yeah,
doing? Like, do I even want to live? And then it's
yeah,
like, well, that's an experience. Let me unhook from that, hook back in here. Like, oh my God, I
yeah,
love life. Like, I just feel vital. I just feel full of it. I just want to express it and bring my gifts. And I feel so fulfilled. And they're just a blip in consciousness away. But because the severity of them is so strong, it forces us to change. And that's what's happening right now. And so any of you that are finding yourselves in that very painful place, I think there's a human illusion that we're helping somehow by being in that, compassionate struggle, but it's contributing to the problem. And having to give ourselves permission to stay, to walk through catastrophe with a smile on our face feels kind of fucked up. Yet when we understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and the influence it has, and the support we're offering for consciousness and for humanity, it feels like the only option. And it's really hard for us to wrap our human brains around
yes, it can be. I'm processing in real time what you're saying, and I've lived it because you and I have known each other for more than a minute, had these types of conversations more than a minute,
yeah, yeah,
and I'm sort of taking everything on as a fresh type of thing right now with it in the context of everything that's happening in the world and
yeah,
personal world and all
yeah,
that, and
yeah,
it's like and after all that, it's sort of okay. I mean, the snarky human version of that is, don't worry, you're gonna die,
yeah.
right? Like the
Yeah,
like
you'll get it next time.
like why are you stressing about this thing? Like the good news, no matter what, you're gonna die. Oh, thanks, that's really uplifting. Um, but the idea is that you get to react to the situation any way you want to,
Yeah,
right? Like it doesn't matter if it's the best situation. It's really easy to react to a good situation well.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's hard to react to a bad situation well. Like
Unless you're already
that's
doing it.
unless yeah, and that's a muscle and that's a
Yeah,
choice and
yeah,
it's really a commitment, and it's, at
yeah.
least for me, it's a daily commitment.
Absolutely. And I think that's, to me, that was the importance of why I wanted to have this conversation today and why I was guided to, is for us to recognize it as a choice point. Because, constant invitations to get sucked in there. You pick up your phone, you turn on the TV, everything's
Constant.
inviting you into the density.
Yeah.
And again, like, what do you subscribe to? Like, what is your social media feed? And,
No
and,
magazines.
and
No magazines.
but it's funny too, and this may feel like kind of a weird analogy, but or just even example is, those of us that have played with past life experiences, and maybe we picked up
Mm,
memories from, and we've recognized, how does this influence me in this life?
yeah.
And that's become more and more commonplace for people to have memories, or to do a past life regression through hypnosis, or to have a meditation experience where they saw themselves in a past life, and it helped them understand something they were working through, why they had a way of being that they could actually shift, because they were now aware of its root cause, and they could purge it and all
Yeah.
that. And when we look back on our past lives, they don't feel like uh, that personal. Yet it absolutely was our soul having this experience. And so, and again, this is kind of a weird example, but when we look at all the shifts and changes, can we zoom out even that much that we're like, oh, this is this lap, this is,
Mm,
this is this experience. And, I know I've had other ones, and I learned what I need to learn there. And this is this one. And so, not to downplay the importance of the life that we're in, but there's something in that that gives us a little bit more freedom of appreciation for the experience, and how remarkable it is to be on the planet at this time, experiencing what we're experiencing, and being able to choose it from a place of, I see the bigger picture. I see what this is unfolding. I see the purpose in all of this. And if I zoom in too much, I lose complete track of the purpose. I'm part of the, crazy experience. Everything that is just inundated me. Or can I stay in that place where, wow, like, what an incredible thing to be on the planet during this time. And there's no mistake that I'm here on purpose, and that I have a role to play, and there's some shit I need to be doing, which is about me stabilizing myself
Yeah.
in these higher frequencies and sharing them with others, because that is what really walks us through this experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, I had this experience a while back where, we'll call it was in a meditation where I
Mm-hmm.
saw this this space that I was in post this life, and
Mm-hmm.
and there was someone there, and the question they asked me was, "What'd you do with your time?"
Mm-hmm.
And like the real sense of being responsible for what you did on this planet during your lifetime was very palpable,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And like and you need to answer that. I feel like I will need to
Yeah.
answer that
Yeah. Yeah.
in one way or another. And so when things get hard, when things get stressful, when things get wonky, it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
well, what did I do with my time in this moment
Yeah.
to make this situation better than what it could have been for
Yeah.
whomever,
Yeah.
myself
Yeah.
included?
What was my contribution? Did I dense it up and make it
Right,
more
right,
intense? Or did I help usher humanity through this and myself through this by
right.
stabilizing a high frequency?
Yeah,
Uh, yeah. And it's, yeah, it's funny. My third eye's activating like crazy as I said that. Like it was just this emphasis of know your role, and don't get too sucked into what's not, because there's an endless supply of that. And there's a very, simple direct access to what's not that. And so it's kind of a funny thing because it's almost like like I was just having this flash of like playing tag as a kid, and having safe, like home base, where
mm,
like you could run and be like, oh, I'm on the safe place. And then you go back out again and you get chased around. You go back, oh, I'm on the safe place. And you can't touch me when I'm on the safe place. Or whatever, home, what was it called with tag? I don't even know. Um, but you get the idea. And so like when we're here, like we're rather untouchable, but there's constant invitations to leave home,
constant.
go out, and do we take them seriously, or do we just see them all as bait? And we're just like, there's a big ass hook in that bait. There's no way I'm gonna bite it. That's not really for me. That's not my food. My food, my nourishment, my fulfillment's right here, and my responsibility.
I mean, if you're to look at your choice points like they're things on the menu,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Like, there's certainly better things on the menu,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
mostly when that dessert menu comes over, chances are it's just not good, right? I mean, largely it's not. It's unless you want to spike your sugar.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but there's other things on that menu. So what do you want to choose?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and it is. There's one thing, or there's a infinity things. There's like one place,
That is so
or there's
true.
all that. And to me, like it makes it so simple because it's not like, well, there's 10 different things I should choose. I could no, there's only one, or
Yeah,
there's all the other stuff. It's either
yeah.
this or all of that.
One
Yeah.
makes choosing super, like there's no choice in that choosing. Once
No,
you make the
no,
initial choice,
yeah,
it
yeah.
you just have to recommit to it. It's less of a choice than it is a
Yeah,
recommitment.
yeah. And which is why, we have so many resources with the Aligned Living stuff, and again, the links are in the show notes. So
Yeah.
there's a bunch of free stuff. And if you want to take it further, obviously there's courses that we have, there's several 10-week programs, whether it's groups or one-to-one. And more offerings are being shaped up now because it's just so imperative, like what we're doing. And it's really exciting to me to think about, when I got this download 8, 9 years ago,
Yeah.
it wasn't needed then. It was all forming and it was stabilizing, but it's really for right now. This is, the last 8 years has been preparation for having it stabilized and ready to go for this time period. And so, if this conversation resonates with you, check out the free stuff, reach out. Um, we're here, like it's kind of so fascinating and magical to me of like, this is the point where all the stuff, all the work we've done is preparation for right here, right now, and now it gets to be executed.
Hmm.
Um, and it's incredibly exciting times, and also all that other stuff's available. And
Hmm.
so, you know, what are we contributing to, and what are we experiencing? What do we want our life to feel like? Our experience of being to feel like?
Yeah.
And there's choice, and there's tools, and it's simple, and it's easy. And once we have that structure, we become the one in charge rather than the experiences.
Is that it?
That's
I
it.
think that was a lot. A lot of good, but still a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a simplicity happening that looks very
Yeah.
complicated, but it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I think at least for me, that's the biggest takeaway. Like you can
yeah,
make it as complicated as you want. Also, it can be very simple.
yeah, yeah. And complicated is like excuses. It's like reasons. It's like versus.
Distraction, bullshit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's not
yeah.
what we're doing.
No, no. So please take us up on the resources. Reach out. We'd love to hear from you. And those of you that want to take it further, obviously the group programs and one-to-ones are available. So thanks so much for tuning in again, and have a great week, right? Because
Make
the
good
other option is
choices.
have a catastrophic week, right? It's
Choice is yours.
absolutely awesome. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to part 2 of this 3-part series, and join us next week as Janine and I dive deeper into intimate relationships. See you next week. We hope you enjoyed listening to today's podcast, and if you did, please subscribe so you can catch the next episode. If you want to learn more about the Aligned Living System and how it could support you in your life, check out davidwaldas.com.